Ronald Deschepper, seaman. My interest first grew from an uncle who was in the Navy. He was an electronics technician. I don't think he served in World War II, but he did in Korea, which was the inspiration to go to the Navy. I enlisted in 1969 at the age of 17. Of course, my parents had to sign paperwork, broke my dad's heart, but it is what it is. That really wasn't too difficult. Great Lakes, NRTC, Chicago. My dad was very much an old world disciplinarian, so discipline was nothing new, and the military discipline just kind of carried on what he started. So transition wasn't hard. Navy boot camp wasn't bad. A couple of the classes gave me some trouble, but things like the obstacle course were a breeze. I ran harder obstacle courses in the Boy Scouts than I did in military boot camp. Well, that's things everybody goes through. It was truly an experience, not a pleasant one, but I made it through. A lot of the guys needed help coming out of the gas chamber, of course, but we all made it. Well, we got our first set of orders right at the end of boot camp, and I had sort of convinced myself I was going to be assigned to a destroyer and I was going to be stuck as a bosun's mate. I got a surprise. They sent me to an aircraft carrier, the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt, and I was put in the supply department and into S3 Division, which is the ship serviceman, and we took care of the ship's laundry, the ship's stores, the barber shops, tailor shop, cobbler shop, uniform shop. Well, I was amazed sort of at its size and definitely at the size of the crew. I did not think that ships had that many people on them. That was rather a surprise. Well, the food actually was a little better than it was in boot camp, which boot camp caused me to gain 20 pounds. So, I mean, chow time was always something to look forward to. The biggest thing that I still have from my time as in the Navy, is a permanent crook in my fingers from the coffee cups. That has sort of become a staple over the years. Learning the actual verbiage for detailing where you were on the ship by rib or by other markings that they had, that was a little more difficult. Because, I mean, you were at, rib 37, space whatever, deck 2, 3, whatever it might be. The first job I was given was in the ship's laundry as a laundryman, which was unique. Being the oldest of 9 kids when I left home, doing laundry was not anything new, but doing it for 5,000 people was. And operating on the press decks and starching the officers' uniforms, pressing them, folding them, running a mangler, pressing sheets, was quite a learning experience. They made it pretty easy. Everybody is issued a laundry bag. They put their laundry in that bag. Those bags go in another bag, which is marked by division, by compartment, by division. So getting them back is fairly simple. 2 med cruises, back to back. We visited Spain, France, Italy, Greece, Malta, Palma. So good variety. I forced myself to learn some French, some Spanish, to help better communicate when I went on liberty. And I felt that doing so actually was an honor, or an attempt to honor the people who were hosting us. For the most part, I think we were treated pretty well. I personally don't know of any difficulties. I'm sure there were, but it's not something that was advertised a lot. I believe in an effort to not have it continue. There were definitely exercises that we took part in. There were times when our squadrons did more than just get in their flight hours, because they did various things. Different aircraft had different missions when they were in the air, and they looked for submarines, they looked for hostile ships. Several times we had overflights by Russian Bears, and they were escorted away. Usually, if we were underway, it was everybody was at full attention. In port, it was very much pushing goodwill to our hosts and the people that we actually interacted with. And especially in the Mediterranean, I think we did a pretty good job of that. Well, on the second deployment, during an UNREP, an underway replenishment, I got involved in an incident where one of the items that we were unloading were rags for the machine shop and other shops that needed rags. And there were about 200 pounds of bale, and one of them started rolling across the hangar deck, which I saw as, that's going to hurt somebody. So, being a concerned sailor, I guess, I jumped out in front of it and stopped it, which tore the cartilage in my knee. So I was sort of on light duty for the remainder of the cruise, which was only a month or so. And we got back to the States. I was given orders to Naval Air Station Jacksonville to report to the hospital, where they did surgery on my knee and fixed me up, and I recovered. They put me back on active duty, and the Roosevelt had just pulled out for another cruise, so they altered my orders and sent me to the USS Saratoga. And upon boarding the Saratoga, I was assigned back to the Supply Department and S3 Division. And on the Saratoga, instead of being in the laundry, I was one of the ship's barbers. So I became almost everybody's friend. There are a few people on a ship that you really don't want to get on the bad side of. The barber is one of them. Because while you're at sea, there's not that many people that are truly interested in upkeep on their hair. That comes about a week before you pull into port, when it gets really busy. And I was very fortunate, because most times you're given a job, you learn on the job, but I got lucky because I was taught to cut hair by 2 master barbers and a master stylist. So I was pretty good at what I did. I could do a 5-minute haircut. I could do a 20-minute haircut, depending on what the guy wanted. So I got a reputation as a good barber, And at one point even had one guy who I happened to be his favorite barber, and we were back in port, and he drove 90 miles looking for me to get a haircut. And it's like, okay, either I'm really good or he's really stupid, one or the other, you know. So, but I thought that was kind of cool. I only made one cruise with the Saratoga. I went aboard in '71. And in April of '72, we geared up for a cruise, and they put the word out that all Leave and Liberty had been canceled. And I was sitting at a drive-in watching a movie, and they put this big message on the screen. And about half of the cars that were there disappeared. And I looked at who now is my ex-wife, and I said, that only means one thing. And she says, what? And I said, I think that means we're going to Nam. She says, no, I won't believe it. Well, a couple of days later, she didn't have a choice but believe it. So we pulled out, and it was a 10 or 11 month cruise. Most cruises at the time were like 6 months. So this was an extended cruise. Exactly why we got extended that extra 3 or 4 months, I don't know for sure. I have my suspicions, but I'll keep them to myself. But that was a unique experience and learning opportunity. And I will say that a deployment like that, you don't come back the same person as when you left. Navy life, shipboard life is unlike anything else that you're going to experience. There are the other branches, whether it's Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard, they do deployments, but except for the Marines who are assigned to the fleet, they don't know what it's like, and it's hard to get that across. And having been, number one, a scout, at one point an avid camper, outdoorsman, I can understand what their life is like when they're on deployment, out on maneuvers. Good being an outdoorsman and a camper, survivalist, it's pretty much the same. Doing that on board a ship is way different because you can't go anywhere. You're there. And what you have is what you have, and you make do with that. The other services, you're out there in the open, in the wilderness. There are lots of things you can gather that you don't carry with you. We have to carry everything with us. So it makes a difference. There's 110 different things going on at the same time. There not only are stores or equipment or parts that are being passed by line from one ship to another or being brought in by helicopter, sometimes even flown in on another plane, but the activity going on both the flight deck and the hangar deck with moving all that is, if you stand back and watch it, it is a choreographed anthill. You got people moving in every direction. everybody staying out of everybody else's way, getting their job done without getting hurt. It's unique, to say the least. We were not a division that was on the list of need to know. We found out things, but we were not in that chain of information. So it was kind of up to us individually to find out what we could about what was going on, what we were doing. I mean, we all knew that we were flying missions and sorties, both in support of combat and doing things in the supply chain for people who were actually on the ground. But if you wanted to get more detailed than that, we all sort of had the ability to make connections with people that could answer our questions so that we knew. During the cruise, the biggest thing that comes to my mind is probably the worst memory of that particular deployment, which was the fire on board. I lost 2 friends in the fire. So memorializing them was and is a big thing, because I still think about them. And it's the courage and the valor of every serviceman, but when you're on a ship and something like that happens, that goes a couple steps beyond the normal. And the people who have to live their life in a confined space and develop the ability to deal with that, they need, every once in a while, they need to have a special pat on the back. Because I had put in a request sheet for a day off while we were in port because it was my birthday. And it was my 21st birthday. And the request sheet was approved. And we got word that the fleet landing was being shut down due to an emergency. I went to the fleet landing and could not get back to my ship because there were no launches. And all I could do was stand there and watch. And that is, other than the knowledge that I learned after I got back on the ship, that's the memory I have of that incident. Well, given the distance, you couldn't see a whole lot about what was going on. You could see, movements, but you didn't really see what they were doing, but you could see smoke coming out, so you knew there was a fire. Because when you're in port and the boilers are only on standby, you don't really see that. So that means only one thing. And it was a very saddening thing to stand there and know you need to be on board and you can't get there. Several different descriptions of what happened in what section and on what deck. And then you take all the information and categorize it and put it into a chain of events. We found out what started the fire. We found out where it started, how it spread, what happened with the people that we lost, where they were, how they were lost, this kind of thing. And you compile all that to more or less get a full story of the incident. And you just catalog it. You put that in a box, you go back to work, and you do your job. Yeah, which is what we did.